Hey y'all, I'm Matt, and thank you for tuning in to another live stream of Improv and D&D. So, if it's your first time here, it'll be fairly casual. If you have any questions about improv in general, or applying improv to D&D or other TTRPGs, feel free to leave them in the comments. But if not, I'm going to start trucking ahead with a little tool that I like to call, well, I learned this from my friend Chris. It's called Flash Memory. And this is one of the strongest tools that you can use at the start of an improv scene or at the start of a role-playing scene. And this is how you develop emotions. Whenever you're playing, things are said, things come up. I'm going to start with an improv situation. So, oftentimes we get a suggestion of a single word. And I'm actually going to look up a random word online real quick. Random word generator. Because I want to be true. I want to be true to the craft here. So the word I got is reason. The very first word that popped up is reason. So I'm going to switch over to my sheets and great, here we go. Flash memory tool to start. Emotion. So, the word reason. Now, in this case, what you do, and this is a muscle, so when you start off, this could be really hard to break into. But when I hear the word reason, because I've done some shows where I have to be able to grab that word and immediately provide a memory to the audience without any real lead time. I'm used to this. So if it takes you longer, that's okay. The more you do it, the easier it'll get. But essentially what we're looking for right now is a memory that is specific and important. So, in this case, the memory that comes to my mind is when, and I'm not going to go too specific just for privacy sake, but when I think about reason, it makes me think of when I was in high school. And I remember my family member having some health issues, and I didn't know what to do. I felt like I needed to do something. And so I jumped immediately to the most extreme thing. It was a kidney issue. In which case I was thinking, okay, I don't know what to do. I feel like I need to do something. So maybe I need to volunteer my kidney. And I asked my biology teacher at the time. I was like, hey, so what's the process like for donating a kidney? And she was like, what are you talking about? And I mentioned what was going on with my family member. And she was like, wow, that's really noble of you, but you might not need to do that. Do you know much about the situation? And I was like, I don't know. I just heard that there's kidney problems. And she's like, you know what? There are a lot of people with kidney problems. That doesn't necessarily mean that you need to give them your kidney. And I remember feeling like a little embarrassed. But in this case, here, with that memory, I mean, right now I'm already feeling a little hot. Like, remembering that conversation of like the relief and embarrassment of me jumping forward too many steps. But that's how flash memory works. You grab a word and you connect a memory, a specific memory, that may be, that it should trigger an emotion in you. I think of utilizing this as being like when, sorry, I need to turn down my music real quick because it's making it hard for me to focus. Okay, there we go. It's like, it's not that crazy. It might not be that crazy on the stream. Oh, shoot. Hey, Ondawin. I appreciate you stopping in. No worries. I just appreciate the support. Thank you so much. Sorry it took me so long to notice. I just got caught up in this exercise. But the idea, it plays off the same sort of thing that happens when, you know, sometimes it's late at night, you're about to go to sleep, and your mind starts wandering, and you think of something really embarrassing that happened, and you think to yourself, oh my gosh, I'm so stupid. Why did I do that? Why did I say that? And then it feels like you just barely said it, or you just barely did it. Well, that's the sort of thing we're playing off of here with the memory. You're trying to find a specific memory that happened that's important enough that made you feel something. Because when you have that, it allows you to start this scene with that powerful emotion pushing you forward. In this case, with the kidney story, I have several emotions. There was one of, I would say, desperate determination, because I didn't want anything bad to happen to my family member. I could use that. But right now, what I'm feeling more strongly, because I'm thinking about that one point, was the slight embarrassment of being too reckless, I guess. And so then, off that one word, reason, I already have a feeling that I can play. And then from there, if it's an improv scene, it's like whatever your scene partner starts with, you have an emotion that you can use to drive this. Or you could start it off with this emotion. And if you can't think of something to establish, some scene to establish, you could just say, I feel like a fool. Because, I mean, that's how I felt in that moment. And so I'm pushing forward with that emotion. Now, if you're in a D&D game, then you have generally a little bit more time. Maybe you're role-playing with a character. And in this situation, it's just a matter of reading the mood, right? Trying to see what is going on in this roleplay scene. If the two characters, if your character is about to apologize or something, or if your character is about to try to get something, like maybe some information, then you can very easily start off the conversation going after your objective. And then listen very carefully to the words that the NPC is using. And from there, you can allow those words to inform an emotion. Here, I'm gonna try to find a random word that an NPC might say. Oh, perfect. Wrong. Okay. Great. So in this case, if you're role-playing with an NPC, and maybe your character was your character is trying to get some information, and you're going back and forth a little bit, and then at some point the NPC says, that was wrong of you, or you're wrong. Now, in this case, I mean, sure, as the player, you know what you're after, but you have a chance to play this in a way that could be beneficial or it could be detrimental. I guess it just depends on what the word wrong brings up to you. Because I'll tell you what it brings up in me. It reminds me of when I think just in college, maybe fresh out of college, and I remember going to a Magic the Gathering tournament, and I was playing against the owner of the shop, and they got a rule wrong. And I was calling them out on it because I was like, hey, that's not how this goes. And then he's like, no, this is how it works. And I'm like, no, I play online, and online there's like all the rules are built into it, and it's like if you tried to do what he did, that's not how it works. And so then he calls over the judge. I mean, it wasn't like a big official tournament, it was just like a fairly casual tournament, but still, he calls over the judge who's his employee, and you could tell like I got the vibe that his employee knew that he was wrong, but because that's who pays his paychecks, he had to side with them. And I was like, all right, fine, go ahead. And then I proceeded to beat him for the next 2 games because I was like, no, I have karma on my side now. But in this case, I'm gonna put as my reminder of this story, MTG tournament. Oh my gosh, my typing is off the charts. Tournament revenge. So in that case, because I was in that more vindictive state, I felt like it was one of those situations where I was like, I'm gonna be so ticked off if I don't win this. And I was determined to win. It was like I imagine like road rage, but in a card game. So then in this case, I trounced him, but I felt like triumphant, as though like someone who wronged me had just got their comeuppance immediately. Immediate karma. And so in this case, there are 2 emotions. I can have that desire for revenge, which is powerful, or triumph of comeuppance. And in this case, I would say maybe this one's a little bit stronger. Like, now that I'm thinking about that moment, that stands out more. And in which case, while my character is trying to do this, trying to get the information from this NPC, I hear the word wrong. I allow myself to feel that so I can channel it into the character. And now, all of a sudden, my character is going to latch onto that word and go on the offensive. In which point, because of my using my emotion to inform the character, it makes it a very likely a detrimental choice, but it is informed by emotion. And so then in this case, the role play is going to be fueled by something a little bit stronger. Though, in this case, I'm probably going to lose. I'm probably not going to get the information I want. But it can be a fun moment. Could be a funny moment. It just depends. But that's the power of flash memory. And the idea here is just that a backup of memories specific to certain emotions. Kind of. I mean, I think of it like, I mean, everyone does, right? Everyone has quite a lot of memories that are associated, I mean, with different things. And it's just a matter of, over time, learning to go back in your head so that you can access them more easily. I used to do a show called Pyramid Scheme. It was the three of us. That's why it was Pyramid Scheme. It's like we were always in a formation that was like a triangle, but it would always start off with, I mean, not always. Eventually we got to the point where we were sharing, but the first person up would introduce and then ask for a word. And from there, we would just start talking. Like, we would start talking about memories. And then once our memory was complete, we rotate to the next person. And then it's up to them to talk about a memory that they may have remembered based on what the first person talked about. And then you continue on until you've got a bank of ideas that you can draw from and develop scenes with. So, yeah, in answer to your question, Jordan, thank you so much for asking. It just helps me so much when y'all interact, because then I have more fuel. But yeah, I think that everyone has this. Well, I mean, they have access to all of these memories, and it's just a matter of training those muscles so that you can go from that one word into a memory, into emotion. Now, that's why earlier on I said that for the memories, it has to be something specific and it has to be something important. Because in one scenario, I was talking with a friend of mine. I'm just going to call him M. And I was working with him on developing his scene work. At that point, he had a habit of playing himself over and over again in scenes, which is fine, but it is a little limiting if he's not intending to do so. And I was talking with him about it, and I told him, like, hey, let's try this. Let's try using flash memory so you can access more emotions and play someone else. And I asked him, I gave him a word, and I asked him, hey, so what does that make you think of? And he said, it makes me think back when I was in high school, when we would, after school, just hang out at night at this diner. And it was just good times. And I was like, okay, great, but I need something specific. Was there one moment in particular that stands out in those diner nights? And then he thought for a moment, and what came up was his one memory that was associated with when he arrived at the diner. It was just him and his friends, and the cops showed up. And when the cops showed up, he was like, oh crap, what do we do? We're in trouble. Did I do something? Did you do something? I believe they ended up being questioned that night. Thankfully, none of them were thrown in jail or anything, but the fear of having done something, maybe accidentally doing something, that terror stood out. And from there, I said, hey, you thought of that memory. You thought of that moment. And I asked him, like, how are you feeling right now? And he's like, yeah, I'm feeling a little scared. And I was like, yeah, of course. This is what happens when you can find those specific moments. Just like those moments of embarrassment, that can be powerful. It can help you propel yourself, whether you're in a scene or whether you're in a scene on stage in improv, or if you're in a scene in D&D. Just finding those emotions. Now, there is something that'll come up sometimes where, as far as the word is concerned, maybe that one word doesn't give you anything. Like, I'm going to click the random word generator again. Element. Okay. Element. I mean, I feel like this random word generator is just my best scene partner here, because element doesn't give me anything. It doesn't really make me think of anything in particular immediately. So, what I do from there is word association. What does element make me think of first? Well, it makes me think of the periodic table of the elements. Okay, does that make me think of anything specific and important? Makes you think of science class, which in turn makes you think of, I should put class here too, the science fair, which makes me think of when I went to ISEF, and I do remember there being a situation where my friend was, I mean, I want to say that she disappeared, but no, it's just that we couldn't find her, because amidst the science fair, they had like rented out ballrooms where we could eat and then chill. And in the basement of one of these ballrooms, we had, it was like a buffet / dance club. And I remember being in that basement, and like, the food was all right. Going to the dance club where everyone was just standing. It was just standing. I think there might have been like 1 or 2 people who were dancing in the center, but everyone else was just standing, looking, and I was like, this is lame. So I went over somewhere else to an arcade, and I met someone else who was at the science fair there, and we just started playing games. And then I'm like, oh shoot, I probably need to go. And then I went upstairs, found everyone except my friend. And I was scared, because I was like, wait a second. This group is so tight-knit that they should always be together, right? When have they ever parted amidst this week at the science fair? And then like my mind went into the that negativity spiral where I was like, oh shoot, what are the things that could happen here? And I went on a tear. Like, I went back downstairs and I was ready to kick someone's butt. I was just in this mode of like, I need to find her. And if like she's cornered by someone or something, then they're getting their butts kicked. And I was like just storming past people, just looking, scouring. And I got so like caught up in this potential, like this determination and anger, because I kind of envisioned it being like what Liam Neeson felt in Taken. Just like that protectiveness, and just I mean, heck was gonna pay. So I was so enveloped in those emotions that I actually walked right past the table she was sitting at. And then, like, the other people there were able to say, "Hey, Matt, she's right here," and I was like, "Oh, oh my gosh," because I was like expecting the worst, but I still remember that rage I felt. Um, this like, okay, we got to be ready for anything. To the point where afterwards, when we got back to the hotel, I remember needing to get like a glass of water and just sit down for a second while everyone else was like going to sleep. Um, but that is another memory that, in this case, it's just that determined and a blind fury. Like Taken. And oh, this song isn't fitting the vibes I'm going for. But yeah, I mean that one, I mean, I'm already feeling a little heated thinking about that night, but thankfully she was good. But yeah, it's like if you're in a situation where the flash memory isn't quite, the word isn't quite giving you the sort of memory that triggers something important, then you can word associate from that word to get to some place where it's like, okay, there's the important memory, and I can use that to push into this moment. Now, as far as flash memory is concerned, when you start with that level of emotion, it gives you and whoever you're playing with something to play with immediately. Like with my determined and blind fury here, if I'm in an improv scene, I can start with that. And since I've defined it as being both determined and blind, my character is likely going to be very neglectful of whatever's going on. And maybe they're going to say things that they will regret. And we get to deal with that. If you're in a D&D roleplay moment and something triggers this sort of blind fury, then I mean, of course you'll have to justify it. In an improv scene, it's like we're making a scene out of thin air, but if a word is able to trigger this into you, you will, to make sure that everyone else at the table understands what's going on. You'll have to talk us through it, develop this idea so that they don't think that you just pulled it out of thin air. And I mean, if you're associating off of a word that occurred in the conversation, then you aren't pulling it out of thin air. But there will be a little bit more of a talking out process. How do you decide whether a memory is important enough? That's a fantastic question. So, important enough memory. I'd say in that case, it would just depend on the strength of the emotion. Because the best memories for this, the best ones are the ones that make you feel immediately. Just like those embarrassing things that you think of, where, I mean, I'll think of an embarrassing moment right now. Okay. I remember when I was in the 6th grade and we were supposed to, there was like a Valentine's dance where for every song you had to get people to fill out like, okay, we're going to dance for the first song. or we're gonna dance for the 4th song. They wanted everyone to fill it out just to make sure that, you know, you wouldn't have to go up and ask someone in the heat of the moment and risk the rejection then. But I still remember going up to the girl I had a crush on and asking her, and like it took me so long to ask her that by the time I did, I only had 1 slot left, and she only had 1 slot left, and our songs did not match up. And I felt, I mean, even though it was a matter of like, she couldn't have said yes, right? Because the cards were full, except for, I think mine was 6 and hers was like 3, but I still felt the embarrassment of rejection. Because that's, oddly enough, that's kind of just how rejection works. But I think back to that, and I mean, I still feel like just that little pit in my stomach. And I mean, embarrassing moments are the ones that come to mind immediately of like examples to go through. But a memory is important enough if when you go back to it, you can feel it again. Not that, I mean, there are some memories where they are important enough, but you might not be able to feel them, likely because of resistance. I mean, most of the time, that can be associated with memories that were very traumatic, and in that case, I'm just like, hey, if something is going to wreck you, then as an improviser, I'm inclined to say, don't do that one. If the first thing that comes to mind is one that is filled with trauma, then don't use that one on the improv stage, because it'll be too real. There was one time, and I guess this is like a counter example, but I was doing a scene where I was being coached by one of my favorite teachers so far, Dave Rosowski. And one of the things he does is he has you essentially do a scene with an invisible person, except he's like coaching you through, and you say you continue to build on an idea until you reach a point where it changes. And what happened then was I was triggering a memory of another family member who was dealing with some health stuff. And as I was doing the scene, I was holding on too much to the fact that I was talking about this family member, which it gave me the emotion I needed, but the problem was that I wasn't able to dissociate. And so I was treating the person as though it were the real person in real life. And that was rough. That was rough, because in that case, it made it so that I wasn't willing to say the things I needed to say or do the things I needed to do, because I kept bringing that family member into my head. And it kept putting me back into my head. Because I was playing a character, but that kept dragging me back into being Matt. And it kept dragging the person I was talking about into being my family member. So, I guess that's... sorry. That's the big thing, is that it was... memory. In this case, the memory... too traumatic, then the memory is important enough, but not usable because of attachment. Because I want you to be able to use the memory and use it to propel the moment, whether you're doing an improv scene or whether you're at the table. But I also don't want you to be thrown off, because certain memories will hit you hard. And then when that happens, it can be hard to continue to function. So, and this is a key for, like, if you have to do like a monologue, and this is more improv specific than D&D specific, is that if you have to do a monologue, then recognize that if it's something that's that close and that painful, then you shouldn't use it for the flash memory for your scene, because otherwise your scene will deteriorate. It will dissolve into just real life. And you shouldn't use it in a monologue, because that monologue will put you in that place. And that can be tough to dig back out of. So, yeah, that's what I would say as far as like the utilizing specific memories go, is that you're trying to find a memory that you would feel comfortable sharing with friends, or at the very least like close friends, because like my story about being at the science fair, that's one that I'll share with most people, but that's also kind of baked into the fact that I, as an improviser, I've had to share a lot of memories on stage at the drop of a hat. But the ones that have worked out the best have been ones that that I would normally just feel comfortable sharing. Now, as far as, I'll say additionally, this is a good way to branch into story times. If you're doing improv, if you're hanging out with your friends, if you're in character at the table, one crucial thing, if you're telling a story, is finding the way to tell it where you'll be able to captivate. And that can be very difficult. Especially if it's your first time telling it. So, I would say that the most crucial thing is telling the audience how you felt. How did you feel? And you can use this, and I'm gonna, since I put so much emphasis on the improv side, this part I'm gonna focus more so on a D&D side. Like, if you're asked or required in a session to tell a story, to tell some backstory. Maybe you've been asked for a random character fact on a stream. Regardless of what it is, you want to start off with an emotion. You can think, okay, I need to tell the story. I'd say if it's gonna be a story, make a decision of, what kind of emotion do you want to evoke? Emotion to evoke. I'm gonna focus more so on funny. So, as far as a funny story is concerned, there's a fine line between funny and sad. And the difference oftentimes is time and how you deliver it. Joopy, hello! Thank you so much for popping in. You are amazing. Right now, we're just talking about the idea of flash memory, using it to inform a character, whether you're on stage or um, in a D&D moment. And specifically, right now, we're talking about telling a story as a character, where sometimes you're asked to divulge some backstory. Um, and right now, I'm focusing on trying to deliver a comedic story. How there's a fine line between funny stories and sad stories. And the biggest difference is time and how you deliver it. Because if you're not over it, then it's sad. And here's the thing. It's so easy to tell if you're not over it. Because typically speaking, the way you end, the ending says everything. There's one story that... Sweet. Oh, whoa! Okay, Econorlax. I hope I'm saying that right. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you. Oh my gosh, holy crap. Y'all are amazing. Thank you for tuning in. Oh man. Hello. So, we're talking about storytelling, talking about the difference between funny and sad stories, and how the ending says everything. There was one story in particular I'll use as an example is, and I told this for the first time in front of an audience, and that was when I knew it was a funny story. But what happened was the suggestion was train, and what that made me think of was when I went to see... Oh, awesome. I'm so glad. What it made me think of was when I went to see a movie, I think it was The Taking of Pelham 123. I may be wrong. I just know it's the one with... it's the train movie with Denzel Washington. Wait, no, it's not that one. It's the one with... Okay. It is with Denzel Washington, but it's not Pelham 123. It's Unstoppable. It's the one with Chris Pine, where there's a train and it can't stop. Thus, unstoppable. And they're afraid it's gonna crash. And I remember this very specifically because I went there thinking I was going on a date with a girl. We were like, oh yeah, let's meet up for this movie. And I was like, cool, this is my chance. This is a date. Awesome. Well, I show up. I'm excited. I show up 20 minutes early because it was a little farther away. And I was like, oh, I better make a good impression. I don't want to be late. So I show up 20 minutes early. I wait in my car because I didn't want to look desperate. I wait in my car for 20 minutes, step out right when it hits time, go in, and I'm like, yes, I'm excited. I'm looking good. I'm feeling fresh, smelling good, maybe a little sweaty. And then I see her, and I see her with two other people. And they turn, and I'm like, uh-oh. Because it's not like a... I know what you're thinking. It's not a situation where it's like, oh, you're coming along with my friends. Because if that were the case, that would have been so much better than what happened here. Because I thought this was a date. And she's there. The other two people were her parents. Oh my gosh. It was brutal. Because then when we sat down, she was on the far end. I was on the far end. Her parents were between us. Oh my gosh. It was the ultimate friend zoning of all time. And I mean, if you've never seen the movie Unstoppable, and if you plan to in the next little bit and you don't want spoilers, then cover your ears for a second. But here's the thing. When she introduced us, it was so obvious because her parents were the ones who said, "We're glad she has such a good friend." I didn't get friend zoned by her. I got friend zoned so hard by her parents. It was like this orchestrated ploy, and I was like, "Oh no." And so the spoiler with Unstoppable is that, of course, I mean, it's an action movie, kind of feel good but like hectic and sweaty sort of movie where they're gonna stop it. There isn't gonna be a train wreck. At the very least, in the movie, there wasn't, because the train wreck that happened that night was on my date. So, the first time I... right. So, in this case, the first time I delivered that story was in front of a crowd on stage, and it killed. It was so good. But it was at that moment where I was like, okay, it's all in the delivery. Because I could very easily make it just like the saddest thing ever if I were still invested. It was embarrassing for me. It still triggers some of that embarrassing feeling in me. But it's not like, woe is me. It's not like I'm still pining or anything. It's just one of those funny moments that I like to talk about. Yeah. Yep. I dig it. I'll say that night it definitely did. It was rough. It was brutal. A little overprotective. I could see it, though they were pretty chill. Aside from that, it kind of felt more like she wanted to let me down easy. And she wanted to find like a way of doing it without her having to do it directly. So she had her parents do it. And the way I think about it now, I appreciate that, Joopy. The way I think of it now is that it's such a, I don't know, it's such a boss move because, I mean, it gave me so much, it gave me so much joy when I delivered it on stage. I'm like, this is it. So, yeah, as far as like these, why did she, no, here's the thing, Joopy, there wasn't dinner involved. We were just there to watch the movie. So, got in there, got a ticket, saw all three of them. And then we went downhill from there. Why did she bring her parents to let me down easy instead of just like ghosting me? I don't know. I guess maybe at that time it was harder. It was maybe less acceptable to ghost. I feel like ghosting is sort of like the usual now, to the point where like if people are starting to date and ghosting happens, it's almost like, oh, happens, there we go. Yeah, it is a lot of steps, but I gotta say, I admire the effort. I did not stay in touch. I mean, every now and then we'd see each other at school. This was in high school, by the way. Every now and then we'd see each other at school, but I mean, it's just kind of like those, because we didn't really go to the same classes, so it would just be like two ships passing in the night of like a hey, and then carry on, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's just like whenever you're, if you're in a situation where, oh my gosh, this song is like the saddest song. Holy crap. Um, why does this story keep getting more off the rails? Oh my gosh. Good one, Joopy. Good one. Yeah, I think like as far as these like monologue stories go, if you're asked in a D&D game in a moment to tell a backstory, consider whether you like what sort of emotion you want to evoke. Whether you're looking for sympathy from the character you're speaking with, or you're looking to start the party with this story. Like, let's say you've gathered a bunch of people around and you want them to feel good. Then you tell the story in such a way where you can end it with that telltale tone. And by that I mean, of course, like, you know how when I think back to being a kid, when you have one of those little jokes, whether it be a knock-knock joke or just one of those really punny ones, where you ask the question, the setup, and you already have like that grin on your face. Like where you go up to someone and you're like, hey, knock knock, and you're anticipating, you're already thinking, they're gonna love this. This is gonna kill. And then they do the who's there, and then you're like, Olive. And then, like, at this point, your grin is going so wide that it's like, your face starts hurting. Then they're like, Olive who? And then you're like, Olive you too. Ah! And you go crazy. And then they probably groan. But essentially, when you're in-game telling a story, that's what you want if you're aiming for funny. If you want your story to be the life of the party, even if it ends up being a groaner, the idea is essentially that the ending will determine it, right? The way you deliver the ending says it all. Because my story with the train and the date and the parents friend zoning, if I told it in such a way where I'm like looking down and like saying it trailing off wistfully, then in that case it becomes a depressing tale of lost love. But you end it right, then it's like, it's sad, but like tragic clown sad, where you can laugh at it. So the main idea that separates funny from sad is that the intent, you aren't asking for sympathy with your tone and body language. When I tell the train story, it's to entertain as opposed to getting pity, right? I mean, I can see I am getting some sympathy in the chat, but it's the intention on my side of like, I'm not asking for it. I just want to tell you the story to make you laugh, and hopefully I did. So we at this point, I'll be wrapping up. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We talked about using flash memory, specifically specific and important memories to gather an emotion to start off with, whether you're in an improv scene or in a moment in a D&D roleplay. And determining whether a memory is important enough simply by how much emotion it can evoke, but also recognizing when maybe if something is still too fresh or it maybe is a little too traumatic, not to use that emotion because it could make the moment too real for you. And then, of course, telling stories, differentiating between what sorts of emotions you want to evoke and how you can turn a story from funny to sad and vice versa. So, thank y'all so much for tuning in. Y'all have been amazing. Thank you for interacting in the chat. Y'all are wonderful. And if there are any other questions or comments or anything, feel free to leave them here even after I've gone off stream, because I mean, it's another video idea. It's another stream idea next time I go live. Yeah, thank y'all, and I'll catch you guys next time. Take care, everybody. Bye.